He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast Vue with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi a better place to live, work, and play. Today, we're going to have a Coast Vue session with Marie Sanderson. I describe her as a political entrepreneur, a conservative policy powerhouse. Her story is incredibly impressive. She either founded, co-founded, or is partner in 6 separate companies simultaneously. So it's going to be a great session. So welcome to the pandemic edition of Coast Vue, Marie.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here and glad to see you, Ricky.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. It's been a while. We've worked in one way or the other together over a long number of years, and it's going to be so cool to retrace those steps. By the way, I'm in my fishing closet. So, I love that Trey Wingo on ESPN asked Roger Goodell, he said, how's your bandwidth? That's kind of the thing that most of us are thinking about these days. Unfortunately, in my office, the Wi-Fi is a little bit too erratic, and we had to come over here and plug directly into the modem. And that's just what you got to do when you're in a situation like this. You know about technology. You're using it a lot now, aren't you?
Yes, aren't we all? Zooming with our friends and our work colleagues all the time.
So, Marie, as you know, I put you in the category of young leaders of the storm. These are young people who played very significant roles in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and has gone on to do some amazing things in their lives. And I've talked to Ashley Edwards and Joe Cloyd and Brian Sanderson, your husband. And now I have this real pleasure to talk to you. It's really a pleasure to have this opportunity to share your story with the Coast Vue people. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a diversion for people. I think you have an inspiring story for anyone who's thinking about, doing some entrepreneurial things in their lives, that's for sure. But I think just in general, your story is incredibly impressive. So, we're in the midst of the pandemic. That's going to be some of what we talk about today. But I think I mostly just want people to hear your story so they can be inspired by what you've done. The other thing is, I got a prediction I'm going to make. My prediction is that you are going to be a key part of an administration working in the White House for the first president of the United States, Nikki Haley. That's my prediction. And have you heard that before?
I'm a big fan of Ambassador Haley, and that would be a true honor.
Yeah, well, we're gonna come back to her because there's a great story about your efforts to support her, and you became friends with her, and we'll hold that as we go a little bit further into the conversation. But that's my prediction. After people hear this conversation, I think they're going to enthusiastically understand why I said that. So I had a session with Brian. So your husband, Brian, and you have a wonderful, beautiful family of 3 kids. In my Coast Vue session with Brian, we shared that he started a company called the 3 Oak Group, which is essentially a consulting firm. They do government relations, they do policy development. But you've got, as people hear what you're up to, and they understand what Brian is up to, they're going to be like completely surprised that you live in Ocean Springs and that you're able to coordinate your duties and be involved in your kids' school, be involved in the community. I personally don't know how you do it. Ryan tried to explain it to me, and I still didn't get it. How do you do it?
First of all, we love our home, and we love Ocean Springs, Mississippi. And when we did the pro-con of what we do for a living and the businesses that are going to be our livelihood, we wanted to try and figure out how to do that in a place where our children can walk to school and our grandparents are nearby. And so we fought hard to live in Ocean Springs. You said earlier that technology certainly plays a role now, but it has always played a role in our life, the ability to hop on a conference call. When it's not in COVID terms, we fly on airplanes a lot. We tell people often that it's a village. Our children are in school at St. Alphonsus here in Ocean Springs, and we have friends all over the place who are part of our village. It's not just our grandparents and our caretakers. It's people who step up and say, let me take your kids to this birthday party. And that's really special about the Gulf Coast and about where we live in Ocean Springs.
That's so awesome. I mentioned to you offline, and Brian and I talked about this a little bit, but one of the fastest growing sectors of our economy, the changing economy, this is actually going to be sped up actually as a result of the pandemic, is the creative class. These are architects and graphic artists and consultants and policy people and a whole wide range of people are able to literally live wherever they want to live and use technology to do their work. And so you're actually proving, as tough as it may be to be parents and make that really important decision to live in Ocean Springs and be near family and friends and whatever, and work all over the United States, especially in D.C., as hard as that can be, you're proving that if you trust technology and you use it and you have this, what I referred to as a commuting spirit, you can make it work, and you guys have really done that. So let's shift gears a little bit. You grew up in the Jackson area. You went to Mississippi State. You actually went to the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia. Tell me about that. That's such an interesting track.
Well, when I finished at Mississippi State, I was very lucky to have a community mentor that was friends with my father, who was a Rotarian. I'm a big supporter of the Rotary clubs across the country and what they stand for. And they encouraged me to apply for this scholarship. And so I did. And part of it was you had to be fluent in the language. And I speak Australian really well. Kidding. But I went over there and I studied international marketing. And I did my MBA. And it was a very eye-opening experience for someone who was from Jackson and then went to Mississippi State to have this experience to go to school with people from Southeast Asia, from Europe. There were some Americans there. I learned a lot about myself being so far from home. And that was obviously before we had all the technology that we have now. And so it made me who I am now as a young professional and be willing to take more risks.
So you policy was something that you started to get involved in really early. What was the draw?
When I was in Australia, it was back during the Bush years, and foreign policy was a very hot topic of conversation. So I had to learn to defend my views, not only to Americans, but to people all over the world. And then I also had a couple of dear friends from Mississippi State. There are a lot of Mississippians who go to Washington who said, why don't you come give Washington a try? And so I either was going to go the marketing route and do international marketing. And I do a little bit of that now, ironically, or I was going to go the policy route. And our late Senator Thad Cochran had an opportunity. And like all young people, I took it and decided to give it all I had. And it really was the beginning of what I do now in policy. He gave me that opportunity.
Well, as you know, I began to at least know your name back in those days. I was publisher of the Sun Herald, became publisher of the Sun Herald in 2001. And one of the joys looking back is the opportunity we had to visit with Thad on a pretty regular basis. I mean, anytime he came to town, he'd come by and spend time with us. He was a statesman, one of the kindest, most wonderful people I'd ever met, particularly in politics. I mean, he defined what being polite and a gentleman, and if you're given the responsibilities he had in the Senate, especially toward the end of his career, my goodness, I mean, he had all kinds of spears coming at him, and you were there with him. What did you learn from him?
Senator Cochran, one of the things I tell people is that he was the first person that taught a lot of young people to write. So the first just tangible skill I learned was how to write, how to respond in concise language. He would send back any correspondence that was going out from his office with don't use this word, you forgot your semicolon. And so he really took the detail to mentor his young staffers with just basic skills. This is how we return a phone call. This is what we say. The constituent is always right. And this is how we write. And as far as leadership, he would pick people and he would empower them to do their job. He did not micromanage. So the young people on his team had a lot of responsibility. And so we were responsible when the ultimate disaster hit, Hurricane Katrina, for making sure that we heard the concerns of people who were calling us, like you. And because he had empowered us all along the way, we felt comfortable making decisions on his behalf and bringing them to him and the other more senior leaders on his team, because we had learned how to think like the senator, how he wanted us to think.
Marie, that's so interesting what you said about him editing. And I'm so familiar with that. That sort of describes the relationship I had with Roland Weeks. And you did really well in college, and I did. And we come out of college and we think we've got a handle on the world. And what we learn as we get older, the more we learn is the more we better learn how much we don't know. That the journey it better be humbling. If it's not, then you're not improving. And Roland used to do that. He used to send notes back to me, something I thought was just perfect. Now he's going to love this one. It's perfect. And he would send it back. It'd be, I mean, he didn't put a letter grade on it, but my perception of his edits was that it was a D-. But I look back on that now and I think, gosh, what an incredible contribution he made to my career, focusing on a level of excellence. He would say, don't say in 3 pages what you can say in 1 page. You have to be concise. It helps you think. It helps you put what you're trying to say in very distinct terms. We're at the break. We're going to come back and we'll continue the conversation.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Facebook. Facebook.com/SuperTalk MS Coast 103.1.
Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We've got Marie Sanderson here. I describe her as a political entrepreneur and a policy powerhouse. I mean, she does it all. She's involved in 6 separate companies, and we're taking her journey. What an amazing journey it is. We were just talking about her time with Thad Cochran, and just before we went on the break, we were talking about his mentorship and his, and I really want to hear a little bit more about this. That one of the signs of a great leader is when they take mentees underneath their wing, that they're willing to give them this constant feedback to help them be better. And if you're receptive to that, they'll give you more and they'll make you even better. That's a great lesson for young people to learn. But just tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, you had mentioned Roland Weeks and the grades that he would give you. And I consider Roland, one of the leaders of the coast that has mentored so many of us. But Senator Cochran, we would have our own grading system. He would send memos back to us that would say, "Thanks for your good work!" ! And that might be a B. But sometimes he might say, "Thanks for your excellent work!" with 3 exclamation points, and we would all celebrate. And he was always giving feedback. I can say that we may have measured our success by the number of exclamation points we received, but he took the time to do that. And I actually still have some of those memos that I've saved because it meant so much to me.
So at what point in working for Thad Cochran did you realize that, and I guess Katrina played into this, but talk about the decision to leave the senator and come back to Mississippi to work so closely with Haley in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina?
Sure. Well, I'd had the opportunity to see 2 powerhouses work along themselves for a state that I love so much. That was obviously Governor Haley Barbour and Senator Thad Cochran. There were a number of members of the Mississippi delegation that fought hard, but I had probably the best up-close view to those 2. After working for 6 months on the relief package that we came to know it with the senator, I created a good, strong rapport with Governor Barbour, and he asked if I would come home and work for him in the next session, which would have started. I had about a month to make a decision because he had hoped to have me in place by that January, because not only were we dealing with Hurricane Katrina, but we were moving into a legislative session. So it was very hard to leave Senator Cochran. I remember writing him a note that night on stationery and dropping off my last memo at his house. I worked late on my last day on the job, preparing him for a hearing, and kind of tearfully walked back to my own home. But that changed my life. I think I got the foundation I needed from Senator Thad Cochran but I learned so much from my years working for Governor Barber, and it ended up being not only a good decision for me personally, I met my husband, but also professionally.
So what was interesting about this was that, first of all, Haley, before he came to Mississippi, had all these years of political experience, the lobbying firm and public affairs and relations for, I don't know, he did it all actually. And then he came back to Mississippi. I didn't really appreciate this part of the post-Katrina work until I had the opportunity to contribute to his book. And it was this notion. The book did a really good job. America's Great Storm, the book on Katrina that Haley wrote, did a great job of talking about what was happening on the ground after Katrina, but then how much time he was spending in Washington as well.
Mm-hmm.
I knew he was spending time there, but I didn't understand how much time he was spending there, creating this incredibly bipartisan effort. Now, freeze that for a second. You were working with Thad Cochran and Appropriations Committee. You were developing your own reputation as a policy person, and you were ready. Actually, you were ready to come back and work with Haley on this incredibly dynamic moment in our state's history where we couldn't be partisan. We had to be bipartisan, and we had to take the evidence that was coming out of the governor's commission work to show there's need, here's where we need it. We're not going to ask for more than we need. And this whole process, the development, very creative uses of CBDG funds and all of that stuff. You were there at such an important point in Mississippi's history, working with probably what will go down in history as one of the best, disaster governors in the history of the United States. Do you see it that way?
I do. I think Governor Barber says a lot. The media doesn't like to cover an airplane that lands safely, and I think that's true. He had incredible leadership for our state. He's a policy genius. He put forth a request for our state that could be measured, it could be defended, and then when the money came down, he put in place an audit system that made sure that not more than 1% of our funds were misspent. So he was conservative in that he wanted to be a very good steward of the taxpayer dollars that people across the country were given to Mississippi. And obviously our friends in Louisiana benefited from his approach to detailing what our needs were in a very smart, conservative way. But he was also bipartisan. At the time, we had a Democrat Speaker of the House, Billy McCoy. I watched him have a number of positive conversations with our state leadership, many of whom were still Democrat. And then he's respected by all in Washington as well. He's obviously political, and he can give it back to Democrats on politics, but they do respect his policy brain, his leadership, and the way he interacts with others across the aisle. It's a true friendship, and we saw that at play at our state's most crucial period. Senator Cochran, you touched on this, but it was a quiet leader, didn't want a lot of press. I did function as a deputy press secretary for him during my time. I didn't love that role, to be honest, because he wouldn't let us talk about him, wouldn't let us pitch stories, didn't care to be on the record. But I think also because Senator Cochran didn't ask for a lot, when he asked for something for his state, everybody in the Senate, his colleagues, the Speaker of the House, they delivered. They listened at that crucial point.
He was so congenial about his approach. I mean, he was the elder statesman. I mean, he was the perfect guy to be in that role at that moment. He really was. I look back, you mentioned Billy McCoy. I remember at the now famous tent meeting when we launched, we had at the outlet mall, we had to erect these tents to launch the Governor's Commission on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal. And I've said this story before, but when I walked out, Billy McCoy puts his arm around me and says, if there's anything we can do to help you, just let me know. And it was so awesome watching his and Haley's relationship during that time, because their politics could not have been any more different. But they were both focused on bringing the state back. And man, was Billy McCoy the right guy for that job at that moment? I mean, my goodness, it was just one of the silver linings of the Katrina effort that we could come together like that. I wish we could come together like that these days. I bet you do too, don't you?
I do worry about the temperament of politics, absolutely.
Yeah, I know you do. So let's beyond Katrina, you began to see you said okay, your policy chops, we would call them, continued to be developed really well. You started working with the governor on the Republican Governors Conference. Talk about that evolution and how you got so heavily involved in policy. I think actually this organization y'all did as an arm of the Republican Governors organization. You actually worked on policy with that arm for like 5 years, which that was actually a huge stepping stone for you to develop relationships and do amazing things, see new opportunities. And that kind of launched your career from there, didn't it?
I would say it did, if there was such a thing as a launch. But yes, Governor Barber was, like I've said, and I'll repeat again, he's a policy genius, and he believed that policy had to be at the heart of anything that we would push forward at the national level in Republican politics. So at the time, it was natural for him to be an opinion leader with all the governors. They called and asked for his advice. Haley, what do you think on this? What do you think on that? There was another governor at the time who was well respected, Governor Mitch Daniels from Indiana, Governor Rick Perry from Texas. And they all said, you know what, we ought to have a policy arm. The senators in Washington, Congress operates as a caucus. We ought to operate as a caucus as well as Republican governors. So he and I, as his staffer, began to create relationships with Republican governors. Most of the relationships were regional at that time. You knew the governor who was next door to you as a state, but you might not have had a relationship with the governor of Idaho, for instance. So we made sure that not only the governors had friendships, but the staffers did as well, and that there was a database, a warehouse of information, an incubator of ideas to really grow our policies at the state level. So we did that. And we did it for 5 years, and we were successful. I think in 2010, we had a great group of Republican governors elected. Ambassador Haley, she was Governor Haley at the time, Governor Scott Walker from Wisconsin, the first Hispanic American female governor, Governor Susana Martinez from New Mexico. And these governors came in with policy at their disposal, at resources that they could use and deploy in their own states, and a set of governors who were willing and able to be their mentors.
So we're coming to the end of this segment. In the next segment, I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be a Sherpa for Nikki Haley. And the other thing I want to do is we're going to do this in kind of rapid fire. I'm going to name the name of the company that you either started or co-founded. I want you to just tell me a quick thing about that company. And if there's something significant, certainly I want you to mention that. And then we'll shift gears and sort of go into the Nikki Haley chapter, which I think is such a fascinating chapter in your life. And that may create opportunities for you beyond anything your wildest imagination, if my prediction is correct. So we'll come back to that after the break. This is Marie Sanderson. I call her one of the young people of the storm. She did amazing things after her Katrina work, and is a true entrepreneur in the political realm. And we'll be back to her after this break.
Subscribe for free to the Coast Vue podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast Vue with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast Vue. We have Marie Sanderson here, an incredible young entrepreneur who's done some amazing work since Katrina, and we're focusing on her journey. Her school, working for Thad Cochran, then working for Haley Barber. And now I want to turn the page a bit and start to talk about your different companies. We don't have time. We would take 3 of these programs to get into the details of all these companies. But I understand that they're tightly integrated in ways, they work together in ways that enable you to be successful. So you're not working through third parties, you're working through companies that you lead and have skin in the game, and they're very complementary of one another. I can see that so clearly. So let's take each one of them now, Marie, and just kind of break it all down. You were the founding partner of GuidePost Strategies. Now it's a federal strategic communication public affairs firm. What do you mean by federal strategic communications?
This particular firm does a lot of consulting at the federal level to help mostly corporate, some nonprofit entities understand what Washington is doing. So that's interpreting Congress's action or the White House.
Wow, good. Wow, that was nice, short and sweet. But
I endeavor to be
there's a
efficient.
lot going on in that arm, though, I assume.
Yes, we are very busy right now in a time of uncertainty like COVID, and with the administration and Congress constantly considering policies that impact. You've been head of a company, your day to day. It's obviously a very important time for these guys.
Okay, Cardinal Group Policy. It's a policy firm specializing in policy formation for think tanks and elected officials.
Yeah, that's largely an effort that I use to educate and advise elected officials across the country who run for office. I also have done some think tank work, policy writing, that sort of thing.
Where you founded that group. 50 State, the state-based strategic governmental affairs firm.
So that is a bipartisan firm founded by my business partner in a lot of these efforts, Phil Cox, who is Republican RGA's executive director at the time, along with his Democrat head, the DGA, Calm Oku Martoon. And they created what I believe is a best-in-class firm that advises, similar to what I said about GuidePost at the state level. How do you work in state governments? And to tie that to COVID, clearly that's important. Our own governor, Tate Reeves, has a press conference at 2:30 today to talk about opening up the state. And so we're tracking all 50 states very carefully as it relates to this crisis.
Wow. Publica Partner. It's a woman-owned small business and government contractor. You specialize in communications and digital marketing.
Yes, doing work with the federal government in the public relations space. It's on the GSA schedule, and so it does work just with that's a level of certification that you receive in a separate company.
And I've enjoyed the most recent development of Into America. Tell about that.
So Into America is a right of center group or effort to understand what suburban Americans think about policy, what matters to them. When I work on elections, there's rural America and there's suburban America, and there are a lot of people who guide policy and who matter highly populated areas in the suburban districts. And so as a Republican, or not Republican, but a center right policy person, trying to understand what it is that suburban Americans want. What do they want to see? What matters most to them? And we're learning some themes.
Yeah. Well, you described to me and a lot of people I know that they're moderate. They're somewhere in the middle. Just a little. They believe there's a role for government in our lives, but limited. They believe in a free enterprise system. They're opposed to abortion. They're for gun control. It's but it's right in the middle. I don't know where we became so defined by the far ends. Unfortunately, that's where America is today. And the last group is, you're actually a board member for IMGE. It's a digital marketing company.
Image, yeah, we call it Image for short. It is a digital marketing company. We do a lot of corporate work, do some political work, but mostly corporate work to help develop messages, create communication strategies, and deliver that message directly to the end user, the customer, in a digital way.
Again, we could spend 2 hours talking about each of these companies, but it's so smart when you have the opportunity to see what each does and how they connect with each other and they inform, and all these various dimensions of information that you're getting back to you really informs you as a leader to be able to really understand emerging policy and how it could and will affect the United States. And I bet it's going to be so interesting now, in a sort of tragic way, with the pandemic situation being what it is, to see how all of this adjusts and see what the ultimate impact is going to be on policy. I mean, our lives, government, and everything that we were working on before the pandemic is going to change pretty radically in a lot of ways. And being in tune with that is going to be super important. I bet that's kind of where your head is as well, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, we're doing a lot of polling, a lot of studying about how people are working from home, what technologies they like, how you reach those people, and then what are these new changes in habits are likely to carry on post the epidemic. And I agree with you. there's going to be some lasting effects regarding how people do business, what their preferences are, and then back to my other work, how they view policy, what's important to them.
So there's a lot there, and congratulations on that incredible success. And having been from the media side of business and started some new media companies, I can appreciate what it takes to do what you've done. And it takes good partners for sure, but you've been incredible. So congratulations on that success. So we're going to shift gears a bit. I was doing some research this morning because I really wanted to better understand the role you played with Nikki Haley. And I came across this tweet from Nikki. It said this: "The sweetest friend and best Sherpa ever sent me this reminder today. A cool moment 2 years ago. What a fun 2 years it was. Thanks, Marie." Mm-hmm. And then she said, "At Senate vote, a day to remember, at Marie Sanderson." And what you had posted was a picture of the confirmation process in the Senate. Now look, I'm a big fan of Mount Everest. I would love to one day go climb that mountain. I'm getting too old to do it, but I still love the thought of it. Mm-hmm. Sherpa is a Himalayan people that are usually in Nepal and Tibet, and they are known for their mountaineering skills. They take men and women from all over the world and help them climb this incredible summit of Mount Everest and other mountains as well. So I would suggest to you to say that you're the Sherpa for Nikki Haley during the process of her confirmation. That's a pretty important position. Tell me about that.
Well, you would not know this, but presidential transitions usually have an unpaid role called a Sherpa. And every Senate confirmed position has a Sherpa. Their goal is to, you're kind of like the quarterback. You have to make sure that they have the policy materials that they need so they understand the role that they're going to take. You have to handle the logistics. In my role, I had to make sure that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee was comfortable with her. And so there was a lot of relationship development. And this process runs about 4 months or so. The president wins. They have some thought of who they're going to nominate for these various positions, and then you're off to the races. So the foreign policy, I'm a domestic policy person. So largely leaned on a lot of experts to put together her briefing books. To Ambassador Haley, and we'll get to her in a minute, but is a true workhorse. And we beefed up on past, present, and future at the UN. And they practice through murder boards. We rehearse what we think a senator may ask on both sides of the aisle, for that matter, and how to answer the question in a way that's consistent with what the nominee believes, in which case how Ambassador Haley believes, to make sure she answers that question concisely and to the senator's liking. And then we got her ready for the actual confirmation hearing. And so for me, it was a dream of a lifetime. I consider her a friend, and I could go on and on about her as a person and as a leader. But the process I'm glad I had an opportunity to serve on a presidential transition because it's fascinating. And most of the people on the team are volunteers.
Well, the vote was overwhelmingly positive. Mm-hmm. And you guys had to have celebrated, I would assume.
We did celebrate. She was one of the first nominees to be confirmed. And so we celebrated that, and we also celebrated the vote. It was a great vote. And so we were thrilled.
What was so interesting about her to me, I've always been a fan of Nikki Haley, but what was interesting to me was on the heels of Romney and then Marco Rubio, and then their famous "bless his heart" comment to Trump. I bet you remember that well. It was amazing to me that she emerged with such an independent voice within his administration. That was something to behold. We're going to continue this part of the conversation with Marie Sanderson. We're actually talking about her work with Nikki Haley and how substantial that was and what she learned about that. And we'll be back after this break to continue the conversation.
Listen live or on demand and watch episodes of Coast Vue on your laptop, desktop, or on your phone or tablet by going to SuperTalkMSGulfCoast.com.
Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We have Marie Sanderson here, a young, exciting entrepreneur who's done some incredible work from Ocean Springs, who works all over the country, especially in D.C., has a great history with Thad Cochran and Haley Barber. And we were just talking about her role as a Sherpa during the confirmation process of Nikki Haley. And I want to continue the discussion about Nikki for a second. One of the things that amazes me about Nikki Haley is that if you go back and, she was a accounting degree, she was a controller for a family's apparel business. She was involved in the chamber, and that's kind of where she began to flex some muscles. She was involved in a national women's business owner organization. I don't even remember the name of it, but she became president in just 1 year. So it was evident she had tremendous leadership skills. And then she becomes governor, and then gets elected for a second term, and then gets nominated for ambassador. And then at the time, she had not always been on the same page with Trump, which was really impressive, given that she maintained her independent voice. But that she didn't have a foreign relations background. She came into this with having to learn a lot. And the fact that she went into that role and was able to put Russia, as it relates to Ukraine and North Korea, and her positions on Israel, it was incredible to watch her with confidence rapidly develop her own approach and our own sense of I am going to lead as the U.S. ambassador in the United Nations in ways that haven't been done before. It was amazing, wasn't it, Marie?
Mm-hmm. I would say I had the opportunity to get to know Ambassador Haley when she was Governor Haley, and watched her and worked with her on state budgets and healthcare and energy and all sorts of things, and had the opportunity to have conversations with her as a friend. And I can tell you that the public Nikki Haley is the same thing as the Nikki Haley at home. She is who she is. And that is one thing that I admire about her greatly. She also works very hard. And so, to your point, when she was nominated to be ambassador, she's extremely smart, and she is good natured, and she works hard, and she's a leader. And so when you put those characteristics together, she was a very powerful ambassador. It's why she went through the nomination process, as we talked about previously, with a strong vote. She was one of the earliest nominees to be confirmed. And she worked hard at the UN. I think before my experience working with the ambassador, I didn't put a lot of thought into the UN and what it is and what it does. It's a very bureaucratic organization. She had to learn. She had worked at a legislature. She had, worked as a legislator. She had governed on the executive side, and she had to learn the rules of the UN. They're very different. And she wasn't afraid to fight for America. She wasn't afraid to say what was maybe unpopular. She dug in at the UN Human Rights Council and asked questions about what was going on in some of these missions. We've all seen the videos of her raising her hand and putting other countries on notice for things. And so I have a huge amount of respect for her and the leader that she is. But I think that's who she is at her core. She's a very strong person. She's a wonderful mother. At a time where many of us are trying to do multiple things. She was governor. She was elected at 38. And she raised a family while she was governor. And you and I've talked about this before, but she saw a lot as governor. She helped South Carolina get through a lot of things that were difficult for the state. And, they appreciated her for that, but she did that by raising a family.
What was interesting, she joined the Boeing board in February of, I think, 2019, but she actually resigned last month because she disagreed with board members over the recovery money coming back to Boeing. And once again, just her principled approach. I don't agree with this. I don't know the details of the disagreement, but that she was willing to resign showed just how principled she was. What an amazing leader. Hey, we're getting close to the end, and I wanted to talk about China. because you've got some knowledge about that, but we're not going to have time to get into that. Maybe we can do that in a future conversation. But what I'm curious about is, how are you and Brian splitting duties as it relates to your kids? Because I watch my daughter Tori Williams, who's a 6th grade teacher, and she's still teaching classes, remotely with Zoom and all this. Parents have a new role in teaching their kids. How are y'all doing it?
My husband, Brian, is an amazing person and a wonderful father, and we are dividing this, although I will say he's carried more of the load than I have in the last week or two. Handwriting is a subject that I never excelled at, and I'm afraid my poor 1st grader takes after me. But math, learning how to teach math. Brian, again, is working with our son on math, but I think a lot of us are appreciating our teachers. I have always held my teachers in high regard. I've always told them, you correct my child, I have your back. The teacher is right, not my child, always. And I hope we come out of this COVID situation with more parents understanding the role that the teachers are playing in their children's lives.
I think that is definitely one of the outcomes for sure. Listen, we're coming to the end of our time together, Marie. This has been so informative. I'm so proud of you, to have known you back in the day and to see what you've done. It's just incredible what the risk that entrepreneurs take, and to do it at the time when you've chosen to live in Ocean Springs, and you have a husband that's into business, and you have 3 kids, and you try to balance all that. I know it doesn't always work, but you really are an inspiration. And I hope that young people who watch this see that there's a way to do it. And if you don't know what the word creative class means, study it, because it does create opportunities for you. And Brian and Marie are great examples of that. So God bless you guys. I look forward to talking to you again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Ricky. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you very much. We'll see you.